Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner, people. It's great to be back. I want to give a big shout out to my producer, Jimmy Corhan, who runs Comedy Trainwreck. He does a lot for Philadelphia comedians, and we have a lot of great shows on here. And also, don't forget to go to coopscomedycorner.com to get all that Steve Cooper swag. We got this show from this. We got shows from my business show, the Coop Tank. And, of course, Cooper Talk, which my guest originally was on my show, God, like 12 years ago. It's the last time I've seen this gentleman.
Is that how long?
And he came down to the studio in Burbank. And it's Robert Dubac. How you doing, Robert?
I'm fine. Thanks. Sorry I couldn't get there in person. But
I know. Well, we were waiting for you. We just we had so much technical difficulty.
I've got my application in as an airline trafficker. So maybe they'll position me outside Philadelphia.
Exactly. I mean, perfect. Well, you're coming to Philadelphia in a few weeks. You're going to be at the Keswick.
Outside of Philadelphia. Yeah, Pachogi and where is it? Oh wait, first of all, I noticed that can we swear on this?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want I have no idea. I've been doing Christian shows, and it's the biggest hypocrisy of all time. But yeah, and geez, I forget the name of the place. You know how it is at this age.
You'll be at the Keswick Theater. You'll be at the Keswick Theater in Glenside.
Yeah, Keswick.
And it's a great little venue. Yeah. I saw OMD there a few months ago. And now tell me about the show, because when you came on my show, you've had you're such a prolific writer and performer. Tell me about Stand Up Jesus, because that's the show you're touring on. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, all right. Well, so it's kind of a combination of, for our generation, Life of Brian and George Carlin. If you put them both together, this is what you get. But it's actually, which is why I've got sporting the beard here. Jesus comes back as a stand-up comedian. I think everybody's been afraid to do that, to actually say, hey, I'm Jesus, I'm the Son of God, and this is what I think. And it's really not any blasphemy of Jesus. It's actually Jesus making fun of, human beings. But I'm getting a lot of blowback. I mean, the trolls that you get for people who think this is blasphemous, and they're so, the ignoramuses that think that this fairy tale matches, they'll not believe in Santa Claus after 7, but they'll still believe this ridiculous type of nonsense. So it's still kind of ahead of itself as far as, when you're being ahead of the curve, because I've got to deal with all these trolls and all these idiots. And there are theaters that are saying, oh, we don't want to book it because it's too confrontational, when it's everybody who's basically judging Jesus instead of not judging Jesus, because Jesus is really the only person who can do any judging. But they're not going to believe in those. They're going to be too hypocritical when it comes to those type of teachings.
Well, what's funny about that, how you said you're getting blowback from the trolls. They don't go and look into your work. You're a playwright, you're a comic. It's like you're sitting here, and that's what's funny about trolls. They just say shit. They don't do any research. And I'm always someone, hey man, if you do your research and you don't like something, say it. But some people just go, it's like, okay, I got tickets to see the new Springsteen movie, this movie about Springsteen. And I look on Facebook and Cinemark and like, who, or, oh, he's a has-been. And it's like, well, you guys are missing the whole point. The movie is not about, it's like, it's just funny. So what are some of the comments you get? Because I imagine there's some great ones.
Most of them are, I'm going to burn in hell for blasphemizing and trying to make fun of our Lord and Savior. And then, the other bigger one is just, well, you're not making fun of Muhammad because they'll come and kill you. He said, I'm making fun of everybody. What's really interesting about the trolls is they never buy any fucking tickets. They just sit there and chatter, and they don't buy a ticket. I don't care if it's something that they wanted to see, because they just don't go out. This is their entertainment, is just to sit and harass people. It's I don't know. Maybe the Republicans. What the fuck do I know? It's just they've learned through just 10 years of following everybody's footsteps, and there's one huge crowd of sheep full of hate.
Now, where did you come up with the idea? Because as you said, it's something, you're right, no one has done it. No one, the closest thing to a Jesus bit, I remember Kinnison did his bits, back in the day. Yeah. Kinnison did some bits. But
we all did those bits of, and Kinnison would say, oh, I can't play the piano because I have, holes in my hands. And everybody was always one step away from taking the form or saying that, yeah, I am Jesus. So because I've had plenty of religious stuff too. And it was just, well, somebody's got to have the balls to do this. I mean, I started thinking about it 10 years ago when it was really pushed back then. I mean, I'm finally able to get it out now, but it's, you know, I mean, and he comes out and explains right at the beginning. I says, my name's Jesus. I'm from Nazareth. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jesus, you've aged. And yeah, of course, I'm over 2,000 years old, but I'm in pretty good shape here. I look like I'm in my 60s. So and he goes from there. He says, where have you been so long? He says, well, I've been learning how to become a comedian. Good God, everybody seems to be doing comedy these days. So why not the Son of God? And so it goes on from there. And it's all I mean, the stuff that I write, the past 2 shows and this one, are all very thick and concentrated. They're heavy. You got to see them a second time and a third time to get everything. So, but it's nothing to what anybody thinks from the actual perception of it.
So, okay, I want to get to your other 2 one-man shows, but when did you start doing comedy? Because I remember you were on a soap opera, and that's, you know, and then, but did you get the soap opera after you started doing? How did that work? Like, did you want to be an actor first or a comic first? What was your path to getting into this business?
Well, I started as I started opening up for rock and roll bands even before there were comedy clubs. So I was the opening act for, actually, to be honest, after Steve Martin got famous, I took over opening for a lot of the bands that he opened. So I opened for the Dirt Band, and I ended up opening for Ronstadt and Kenny Loggins and Jimmy Buffett. For years and years, I did all the Southern rock and roll guys. But my true desire was to be an actor. So when I came out to LA, I worked at the Improv. You know, Bud put me up there. I mean, interesting story. When I was first in LA, I opened up for Toto. I was on the road with those guys. And we were the first, when they put the tarp or the top over the Universal Amphitheater. It used to be an amphitheater. It used to be out in the open, and they put a lid over it. So we were the first group to perform there because they did a run through to make sure all the lights and sound were working. So they say that Dreesen and Sinatra say that they were the first ones there, but they weren't. We were there a day before them to make sure it was. So I was the first person on stage. So, and Toto, if you remember, is a huge, famous studio band. These guys played on everything from Michael Jackson to Steely Dan, all these great rock groups. So they had this huge fan base of rock stars and musicians that came to the show. And Bette Midler was there. And at backstage, she came up to me and says, "Oh, you're great. You're great. You got to go see Bud. Go see Bud. Fuck Mitzi. Go see Bud. Just fuck Mitzi. Go see Bud." So I says, "Okay, great." So I went, and I even before Bud died, I told him the story. I says, "You know, Bette Midler told me that when I first got to LA to see you and fuck Mitzi. So I took her advice. I went and I fucked Mitzi, and then I came and saw you."
So you went to see Bud.
Yeah, and he put me up right away because I already had an act. It wasn't like I was developing stuff, but my act was kind of a comedy magic act. Because when I was opening for rock and roll bands, magic tricks were the easiest thing to do because everybody's high as a kite. So you can do anything, and it was everybody's completely amazed. But I would do a trick, start telling jokes. When the jokes would fail, pull out another trick. I mean, the standard way of learning how to do this. But I was learning how to do it instead of having to do it in a comedy club. I could do it in front of 500 to 1,000 people. So I already had a honed act when I got to the Improv. But when I got to LA,
so you started. No, go ahead.
I was going to say when I got to LA, then I picked up the acting chops, and so I was doing both. I was acting and doing stand-up. Did a couple of sitcoms, had my own pilot, but then I got hired on the soap opera, and I moved to New York. And by that time, the comedy business was just it's more flooded. Well, I guess it's more flooded now than it was back then, but it got pretty flooded in the 80s. And once I was on the soap opera for a number of years, and I wanted to come back, and I go, Christ, everybody is doing this, everybody but Jesus. So I would go and figure out, okay, how can I put everything together and make a show out of it? And that's when I started doing the solo shows. And then by that time, the solo shows started taking off, that I didn't even go out on auditions anymore because I was making a boatload of money doing the solo shows.
Now, how did you formulate your solo show? Because people always say a one-man show, a one-person show is not all just straight stand-up. And I did a storytelling show a little while ago. I've done a few of them, and it's always hard for me as a comic because we're so used to the laugh, laugh, laugh. So when you tell a story, there's things that aren't supposed to get a laugh, but in our head we're going, holy shit.
Yeah,
We're dying
tank.
because they didn't laugh, even though they're interested. So because when you started doing this, there wasn't a lot of one-person shows. So, how did you start writing it? I mean, how did you put this stuff together?
Well, I studied with Sandy Meisner while he was still alive, who's one of these old acting coaches that people in the circles know about. It was Meisner and Stella Adler and what's his name, Strasberg, who started in America. They all took the technique from Stanislavski in Russia. But anyway, so these guys were all there. And they started as a group, and then they all splintered off, and I ended up studying later in his life with Sandy. And he was always, his teachings is, and the way he teaches, you're in the moment. Don't do anything that is not, that's made up. So after I had all these bits of stand-up, I realized, okay, if I'm going to tell a story, it can't be manufactured. It's got to come from that. So that helped me in writing the stories and getting a proper story down. And to be honest with you, the story has to be really, really simple, at least. And it does still have to be funny every 10, 15 seconds, or they're going to walk out. And to be honest, I don't think unless you're famous, the story can't be about yourself. Everybody will listen to Billy Crystal talking about himself, or Bette Midler, but they're not going to listen to me in my childhood growing up with either a dysfunctional family or whatever everybody wants to take advantage of. So I would write the shows based on something that everybody could kind of identify with. If I was that guy in that situation, what do I do?
So your first show, but you're still touring with, was the Male Intellect and Oxymoron. Yeah. Now tell me about that show, because that was, it's funny because you always had good promotion on Facebook. You always have good posters. Plus you're a handsome guy, so it helps. It's like you can sit there and it's like, I'm going to post. I look like, yeah, you still look good. No, you look like Jesus. And, we're not going to say Jesus had great abs. So anyway, so tell me about that first show, and I want to hear about how you finally, how many drafts did it take, and did you just know you had some great shit right off the bat?
Yeah, well, I was doing here's interesting I don't know if people are conscious of this, but as a stand-up comedian or as a humorist or a satirist evolves, it evolves equally within our own age. So, when you're in your 20s, and especially kids now, they're starting in their teens, 20s to 30s, it's all really about relationships and dick jokes and, trying to figure out what women want and this and that. And then when you get over to, and I'm following this projectile, which is something Twain followed, Carlin followed. I mean, I don't know if they were aware of it even prior. And then in their middle age, it starts turning more towards, okay, well, let's understand about what's going on with politics and what's going on with culture. And then in the end, it turns to religion, because we're all fucking burnt out with this bullshit. And, Twain was so upset and pissed off about the religious teachings. I mean, he had so many hardships when he was younger. He lost his, couple of children, I think, at birth, his wife. He just gave up in believing and went after religion. So I just find that's kind of if you're still evolving, that's kind of your natural progression. So back to the first show, the Male Intellect was about, trying to figure out what women want. I was still single at the time. I mean, I told everybody that I wrote the show, but my wife explained it to me, because I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. But it's about a guy who is trying to figure out what women want and to become a better person. Now ironically, it's come full circle around now, because I did this show originally. I started in the late 80s, early 90s. And I got the other shows going on, but now it's kind of been resurged because it's really the same topics and the same problems that the Me Too movement has brought about. It's just, and we see it too. I mean, you've got so many Neanderthals running around who think being tough, is talking in one syllable words and, being able to pump iron. And I mean, if half of these guys and these would spend 10% of the time in a library that they did in a gym, maybe women would talk to them. I don't know, but it's basically the story that I wrote was about all this guy who had 5 other individuals give him influence. But the problem was those 5 guys were from an older generation. So the advice was terrible, but he has to cull through it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. So I do a lot of characters in my shows too. So that keeps the flow and everything going.
Now, when you wrote in all your shows, this would be a question, when you do it, when you've written it and you perform it, do you still do rewrites as you go on? Do you sit there and say, you have the whole structure, but you add new stuff? Because as comics, sometimes, you think of something new. So if you sit there and let's say, you're doing the Male Intellect, an Oxymoron,
mm-hmm.
and something came into your mind, would you put that in the show? Would you sit there and take the time, or would you just put it on the back burner saying it's not right for right now? I mean, what was your process on bringing in new stuff on a show that's already solidified and formulated?
Well, it's in, you're talking about 2 different steps here. Yes, there's always a lot of stuff to keep it current, but it can't be too current. I mean, you got to leave that to the late night talk show guys, because anything really current comes and goes, and the next week it's gone. So there's no point in putting it in. So all the material has to be an evergreen that fits. So in the process of writing them, the Male Intellect took the longest because it was my first one. It probably took 3 to 4 years before it was really solidified, even though I was doing it. It's not like going up and doing a 5-minute bit, which used to be what you had to have for Carson or for, a talk show. You're going up doing an hour and 20, and there's certain lulls and ups and downs that you have to follow, and different characters speak and whatnot. So you're getting the idea of that and the vibe and the feel of it for an hour and 20 minutes. But in between there, you can tell, man, there's gaps here. This isn't working. That's not snapping. But you're kind of the only one who can tell. The audience really can't. But when you can really tie all those little open gaps together, then it really fires and it's bulletproof. So it took me about 3 to 5 years to make the Male Intellect bulletproof. For the Book of Moron, it took about 2 years, and for Jesus, it took about a year and a half. But it has to be bulletproof in order for people to sit there and listen to it and pay for it when you're not a star. I mean, if you're John Lithgow talking about your stories in the theater, yeah, we'll sit and listen to that shit. But you're going to listen to me talk about, going backstage with the Grateful Dead outside of Washington, D.C. and being stuck in a room with them, smoking dope and tripping out. And you can't get out until the sun rises the next day because there's too many fans outside on the boulevard waiting to try to break into the dressing room. It's not going to be that fun, that interesting. It is now for 30 seconds, but you're not going to make a whole story about it.
I was going to say, I want to hear that story. That's really interesting. It's funny because Greg, the late Greg Kinn, he told me that he opened for the Dead, and he was hanging out, and he thought he was just smoking a hookah, and he didn't know it was like, and he kept smoking it, and he said he went on stage, and he was so stoned. He goes, I don't know what I played, but I think everyone was stoned. He goes, I think I played for an hour. I don't know, but it was just funny because you think about that culture back then, because if you're opening for the Dead, it's a different rock and roll was different then.
Back then, it was harmless. The drugs, we didn't realize how deadly some of the drugs were. So, but I used to work the cellar door in DC a lot, and I worked down there for about a week, and I'd open up for everybody. And I forget who the lyricist was for the Dead. It was Robert. Do you remember? Anyway, he wrote a lot of the lyrics, and he was out on his own doing a little guitar work, and so I opened for him. And it happened to be the weekend, the Dead was playing the stadium, or not the stadium, but the big outdoor center. So they do their show, and back then you'd do 2 or 3 shows a night. You were doing a midnight show or a 1 o'clock in the morning show. So I do a midnight show, and I go up into the dressing room at the cellar door, and he's on stage, and I'm in the dressing room, and the door opens, and the Dead come in. And I was going, what the fuck? He says, oh, we're here to see Robert. We're just going to hang out till he's done, because they didn't want to go in and get the crowd all yammered up. So they come in and start smoking and handing everything out. The show ends. Robert comes up. If you remember, in the cellar door, you go out the stage, you go up and around the top of the building, and you go in the back door, which is where the dressing room, which I think they still have the wallpaper was like spotted cow wallpaper on it. So he comes in, and then somehow the public, and this is before Facebook or before any kind of, instant communication, they heard that the dead was here. So nobody could leave. There was one door in and one door out to this dressing room. Nobody could leave. And outside, there's nothing but fans and, people crowded around the streets. So we stayed in there until the fucking sun came up. And I wish I could remember what went on. But there's no way. There's no fucking way to remember what went on that night. And that's just, but that was rock and roll. So that was what happened a lot back then. And, and I was doing, to be honest, I thought comedy clubs, they'll never catch on. People will want to just go see shows with music, and you see an act and then the music act.
So, okay. Well, I also read, did you do the Mike Douglas show?
Oh God, yeah.
Now tell me about that, because they shot that in Philly. I remember I watched it as a kid all the time. But I mean, just tell me about the Mike Douglas show, because if you grew up, like I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Coop, how old are your viewers? You sure you want to talk about this?
Well, yeah. I want to hear this. Because they watch comedy, they understand the Mike Douglas show. People was shot really. I remember as a kid, and Mike Douglas. I still remember Mason Reese was on. He was the Devil's Hand kid, and Harry Chapin played Cats in the Cradle, and Mason Reese started crying because it reminded him of his father. And if you talk to people, I'm 61. If you talk to people my age, some of us still remember that, and I still remember that for the Mike Douglas. Well, I must have been 5.
The interesting thing about it was back then they did the Barbarians of the Gate weren't that strong. You could get in, and I had this kind of act which was good for television. It was, prop oriented, magic tricks and jokes and stuff. But what I really go away remembering about the Mike Douglas show is, do you know who his producer was? Roger Ailes. And This was before he started working for Nixon. And then, he got fired. He got kicked out. And then he went to work for, I forget whatever the television company was. And the only reason why he started Fox News is because he had a non-compete clause. So the only way to compete was to start up his own network. He couldn't go work for another network. But I remember him as the producer who was using television to get these messages across that he wanted to get across years ago. And to be honest, I don't even remember the bits that I did on Mike Douglas. I just thought I've seen the fucking devil, and in an early stage of his life.
That's insane. That's so funny. It's crazy how this industry is. So I want to get back to you said it took you 5 years to write the Male Intellect, and it only took you a little longer to write the Book of Moron. When did you decide that it was time to move on from the Male Intellect? When did you sit there and say, I have to start writing something new? Because, it's one of those things, you're still going to be going, and if people will still come see it, and if they like it on a show like that, they'll come see it again because people watch comedy specials again. But when did you decide it was time to move on to this next show?
Well, partly, that's just part of the creative process. You just get stale. I've had to have done 5,000 performances of the Male Intellect. And people say, how do you get bored with that? And it's just, it's kind of like, and I'm not comparing this with Shakespeare, but I understand when people do Shakespeare, they always find something new in it, even though those words are cemented into the script. But even with my own little crap, I could still, after 1,000, 2,000 shows, find something new as an actor to bring in and to do with the material. And I still do at this point. But I wanted to do something, like I said, I started getting in my 40s, and I was saying, this is looking a little pathetic of a guy, in his 40s and 50s talking about trying to meet women. It's kind of a bad look. But I had, and then what got me interested in doing the Book of Moron was did you ever read a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman? Anyway, it's how this screen and television has really lowered our sense of critical thought. So I noticed how everybody thinks that image has more than substance. It's all bling at that time, and it really doesn't have any gravitas. So I started thinking about, okay, how, and this was the original, this is in 2012, 2013, when I started writing it, was, this is where the propaganda starts bubbling up, and this is where Fox News was already catching traction. And I was realizing that, it's like Himmler would say back in, Nazi propaganda, just keep saying it over and over and people believe it. So I thought there was something that had to be done with that. And this was when the political system was starting to get split up. It wasn't as divisive as it is now, but it was, you could see people were already picking sides. So the show and at the same time, I had brain surgery in real life. So I had thank God it was a benign tumor, which is why I can't hear when we were talking earlier. So it had to take out the tumor. They had to take out my hearing. So I just started wasn't fascinated, but I started thinking, okay, I was under for like about 6 to 8 hours, while they open up your head. It's real bizarre. I mean, it's kind of, my brain surgeon was incredible sense of humor. He called me up the day before surgery and said, you're all right. You can change your mind. You don't have to go in. I know it's scary. It's frightening. And I said, no, I think I can handle this. I can handle it. I'll be there. And I'm ready. And he says, good, because I'm in jail and I need you to bail me out. So I says, what? He says, yeah, I got caught for drunk driving last night. And I told the cops I'm a brain surgeon, but they're not going to let me out. So you got to tell them that I'm your doctor. So he strung me along for a little bit, and then until finally, but great sense of humor on this guy. And he says, what we do is we shrink the head, the fluid in the head, and move it over to whatever side the tumor's not on. So I had a tumor on the left side of my head. So we're going to shrink the fluid and move your brain to the right. And I says, well, why can't I just watch Fox News for a month? That should do it. And he says, funny, and goes in 6 to 8 hour, I don't remember anything, obviously, procedure. But when I got out and I started thinking, I says, okay, well, what happens if I woke up and I didn't remember anything? And that was the conceit of the Book of Moron. Here's a guy who's in an accident. He can't remember who he is. And the stage represents the inside of his brain, and he has to start from scratch, which is basically good because he doesn't have all the propaganda and the hype and spin that he had before the accident. So in the Book of Moron, the 5 characters that I use are your inner psyches. You got your inner child, your voice of reason, your inner asshole, these, and your common sense, and your inner moron. So these 5 guys trying to get me to wake up so that I can get out of my coma. And it's more, that's the conceit of it, but it's more of, okay, how do you not listen to this stuff that's been thrown down and you've been immersed in, because you got that damn television on all the time, and now it's the computer. So it's kind of an evergreen. It's held its importance throughout, my career in performing it. So, but when the first shows that were booked for the Book of Moron was in November of 2015. The first show I did was the day Trump got elected the first time. And it just felt like, well, that's pretty good timing, but it's really a terrible, report on what's going on in the culture, because I can remember sitting, and it was in Dallas, Texas, of all places. I can sit in the lobby of the hotel after the show or the theater talking to all these Republicans, and they're just full of puff and, success. And I'm just going, oh, fuck, I wish you guys would watch the old interview with Frank Zappa, how he back in the, what was it, in the, I think it was the 80s, where he said that fascism is coming to America. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Oh, man.
I'll have to look it up.
Look it up. But Zappa's talking, is predicting fascism in America back in the 80s. And all the newscasters are saying he's full of shit.
Now, you said you had 5 characters in the Book of Moron. Now, how do you introduce the characters? Are you changing your voice? How do you pull it off so do you wear the same clothes? I mean, how do you introduce each character? Because that's what's fascinating when you hear shows with different characters in one person. Your crowd has to have an imagination. But so how would you introduce them?
Well, it's not as you can talk about them before you even get to them, which you do in any kind of literature. You'll be hearing about somebody's mother from the point of view of the child, and then you get introduced to the mother. I have 5 characters that are in the book, the Male Intellect, 5 characters in the Book of Moron, but they all have their own way of walking. They all have their own cadence, their own speech, their own volume. It's their own tics, and that all comes from working with Meisner and all the acting chops that I was able to develop. And interestingly enough, in the theater, which is the remarkable stuff about doing a show in a theater as opposed to television, is it's 3-dimensional. Screens, television, movies. It's just 2 dimensions. So you're still drawn in, but not as much as you are when you've got all 3 dimensions, working for you. So when you do a character and they come to life on stage, it takes the audience by surprise, but just once. Then every time they come back, they're already tuned into it and they already know that's this guy. Now in the first show, I'll put a hat on one guy, a pair of sunglasses on another guy, maybe a guy put a jacket on and off. But it's kind of magical because you see this transformation. And I've had people on the Male Intellect tell me that they thought it was a different actor when there'd be a blackout and I'd come out as a different character. But it's, I have to get the character straight before he starts speaking in order to, because once he's fully developed, you bring him on stage, it's instantaneous. I mean, you don't really introduce him, he just takes over.
So you do this show and you had lost your hearing. So what was that like being on stage? Because you had so many years of doing comedy, playing in front of 500 people, and our timing and our bearing. I remember having a cold and performing one time, and your timing was off because you're stuffy and your ears are clogged. You're not used to laughs. So how long did it take you to adapt to that, or are you still working on that?
It took longer than, when they say you lose a limb, it takes you 30 days to realize that you don't have your hand or your arm. I don't know what what the say so is of what the phantom limb. They usually say that lasts about 30 days, 45 days. Anybody who goes into rehab, it's 30-day minimum, 45 days. The hearing was, it took a while. It took about 6 months. The problem is I can only hear half of what's going on. Now, Bobby Slayton always tells me, what Dubac, yeah, that's all you ever heard was half of it. That's all you ever got was half the laughs. So, but and there's no stereo. So this ear is stone deaf. And you can't even explain to somebody what stone deaf is, because even if you try to plug it up, you'll still hear something, but it is nothing there. So you can't hear. I remember being on stage and doing some crowd work afterwards, and at the curtain call, and people asking me a question, and I kept looking here, and the person was on to my left, not to my right. But anything I hear came all the way around into my right ear, and I could never tell who it was or where it was coming from. And that took a long time. It took a long time for me every time I walked out in the street, make sure I looked left, because I couldn't hear a car or a bus coming. So it was, and on stage, it was disconcerting. I still to this day don't know what it's like to have a full crowd, because I don't have both ears. And people tell me it's good, but in a way, it kind of helps me, because I'll go, that wasn't as good. And people say, oh, no, it's great, it's great. And says, no, it wasn't. So it helps me be a little more humble and try to make sure I can get those little gaps, tied in.
Okay, so now back to Stand Up Jesus.
Ah,
These other characters, these other shows had 5 characters. Stand Up Jesus, there's 1 character. How do you
yeah,
sit
there
down?
is. I have some responses that are in different voices, and Jesus says, well, I speak in tongues. So every once in a while, they help underscore my parables. And that's more of a device because I don't really become any characters there. I just use different voices, which is great in the biblical sense. But it helps. It's a device within when you're working for an hour and 20 minutes, you still need something that's why, when a lot of comedians say, I'm going to get up there and do a one-man show of an hour and 15 minutes of me doing jokes. No, you're just doing your routine. That's not anything, that's a story of any sort. But Jesus isn't telling the story because everybody knows that story. Why am I going to come in and tell you my story? You guys already know it, and you bastardize it so many damn times. There's nothing I can do to make you think anything different. What I'm going to come back and tell you is how you guys have fucked up for the past 2,000 years.
So how did you sit down and start writing that? Because, once again, it must be one thing, because when you write comedy bits, you have your act and you write a new bit and you slide it in. You go, all right, I got 40 right now.
Well,
now this bit, you're writing an hour. You're writing an hour and 20 minutes.
It's not easy, man.
What was how long? I mean, would you sit down and just write all night, or would you get ideas? I mean, how did you put this together? Because it's an hour and 20 minutes. And as you said, it's Jesus, and it's a matter of, it's a big topic, but it's Jesus. So how did you sit down? What was your writing process to get this show done?
Well, fortunately, I've done 2 beforehand, so I already kind of knew what not to do and where not to get bogged down in the problems. And then, to be honest, there is so much religious horseshit out there that it wrote itself. I mean, I broke it up into bits. I said, okay, first of all, I'm going to do Jesus's resume. I mean, if he had to fill out a job application, what would he say? Then, of course, I would do, the idea of free will. I mean, you have a choice, and I used humor as that. I says, there's a truth that hurts or there's a truth that's funny. So it's going to be your choice whether what you listen to me is going to hurt or it's going to be funny. So, and then we'd go down that angle. Then there was in the end, there's this solution to how you deal with all religions together. So it was still segmented out like chapters in a book, and you would write those. And I had enough sense knowing, I look at some old tapes when I first started doing it, I says, okay, well, that's 1 bit. And that's 1 bit, and that's 1 bit. You can tell that just because of what we've done our whole lives. But that's how it's written. But I've written enough to know, okay, I am going to get a laugh there. I don't know if it's going to be as strong as I want or not. Sometimes you get fooled, you don't get any laugh at all. But Jesus always says, well, that's, forgive me. I didn't make you laugh.
Right.
You want to crucify me? What the fuck? So but putting it together in an hour and a half it's an ordeal. I mean, the memory thing is difficult because, you're going through things that you have to lay some groundwork for that are going to be revealed and, and made fun of in a callback later. And it's monumental, but fortunately with, like I said, with religion, it's just, when I got to a point where I says, okay, how do I write now? There's a section in the show where the reason why Jesus is coming back is 2. 1, he's taken over the family business. He's gotten promoted because Dad has Alzheimer's. And then I go all these instances of where our Lord and our Father has screwed up, and you track his Alzheimer and the growth of God's Alzheimer's from where it started, which was the OJ trial. So he starts there. OJ commits a double homicide. That's the cause of the sin. What was the effect? Martha Stewart went to jail. Okay, the fucking guy's gone batshit. So then you kind of follow that all the way to modern day, and you're just going, all I got to do is turn on a Christian network and see that, oh, I see, the planes flew into the buildings in New York because there were a couple of lesbians going down on each other in a truck in Massachusetts. I mean, that's what, Pat Robertson is saying in the 700 Club. So it's out there. It's almost as bad as Trump, who now you don't even have to tell a joke. You just read what he did. And if you're done with a little bit of irony, people laugh. So, I mean, I knew it was going to be funny. It's just what has to be broached is the fact that, okay, here's this asshole up there acting like he's Jesus. And I go, well, look, you follow with me. You believe in Santa Claus.
That's why you go to a show, which I'm going to ask you, because as you said, you've done these shows so many times. What did you do during the pandemic? Did you start going nuts?
I wrote Stand Up Jesus.
Okay, but did you miss being on stage during the pandemic? Did you miss that part of your life?
And it's still real hard because you still can't, guys our age, nobody wants to listen to an old white guy tell jokes anymore. So you can't even get us. I go into places around the country at a comedy club, and I have to point my picture on the wall saying, yeah, I think I headlined here. I think I can do 5 minutes, but they don't want anything to do with it, right? So, but thank God you've got that rhythm. So the whole time you're writing it, I'm just talking out. When I walk my dog, I do lines. And I just try to get the rhythm and I go, okay, that's funny, but if this rhythm might be a little better and this one won't. So that problem is you're memorizing something one way, and then 3 days later you go, oh, no, I got to memorize it a different way because this tempo is going to be better or this rhythm is going to be better. So it's and with no audience, it's sometimes a crapshoot.
Now you are doing the stand-up Jesus shows, but I also saw on your website, you're also doing Book of Moron. So how do you juggle both? You're going to do some shows. How do you juggle both? Because aren't you going to be in that mode? Because it's not like they're do a 10-minute bit here, do a 10-minute showcase. It's do an hour and 20 here, do an hour and 15. Completely different, and something that you wrote years ago. How do you juggle that? Because I'm headlining a show in a few weeks, and I'm like, I got to do 45 minutes, and I don't perform that as much anymore. But I'm like, I practice it, but then you get on stages, you forget shit. And for you, because you're doing these 2 shows, how do you pull that off? Doing 2 different shows.
This is all I've been doing for so many years. I will do all 3 shows in rep at a theater. I'll do one every other night. I'll change and do another one. I'll have people come back, and they'll come back the second show and the third show. So, but I've done the Male Intellect, like I said, 5,000 times. I can do that in my sleep. The Book of Moron I've done quite a bit too, so that doesn't take. Sometimes I just have to kind of review it a little bit, go over it. But like I said, when I walk my dog, depending on how long the show is or what I have to remember is how long the dog gets walked.
That's good. Hope your dog likes long walks, because you always do an hour and 10-minute show.
My dog's got a sense of humor. He's sitting right over here.
Now,
so go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. So, I mean, I haven't gone up. The only time I've gone up really is in the Jesus show, because it was still new. And it still is new. I've only done about 50, 60 performances of it. So it's still pretty new. But that was, I think I did in Sharp. The third night of a 3-day, the third night I did Stand Up Jesus. I did Male Intellect first night, Book of Moron, and then Stand Up Jesus. And kind of 2/3 of the way through, I went, oh, fuck. And I had to say, I have to go backstage and get a glass of wine for Jesus. And I'd open the computer up and see where the fuck I was. So, but what's interesting now is audiences don't know. They really don't know.
Oh yeah, they don't know. They think it's part of the show. They don't, that's like the old thing when you sit there and you have a joke you've written that you talk to someone and then you throw a fake laugh in. They actually think you're really laughing, even though they don't know that's written into the bit, because it gets an impact. Because it's like I do a stupid part of my act where I laugh, and then they, oh yeah, he's having fun. It's just they don't know, but that's the thing. But they're enjoying themselves. Now, do you ever miss being on camera, that acting? Because you've been doing many shows. Do you miss that? Like, I know you were in different movies when you were younger and the TV show. Do you miss that at all?
A little bit, but I think it's not I don't know, maybe I'm bullshitting myself, but I don't think it's as rewarding. I mean, I talk with friends of mine and people who do it, they're acting for 30 seconds, scene cuts, do another one, and they're doing it for 20 seconds. They're doing it for 5 seconds. I mean, it's hardly ever you ever see anything in a film that's more than a couple of minutes. And even then the camera angles are changing. And it's really, the film and television medium is really the director's medium. It's not the actors. I mean, they're the ones who are making this story cohesive and making it, flow together. So in that regard, the selfish reason would, I'd love to do it so that I could sell more tickets. I mean, that's real. I mean, I'd rather do what I'm doing now, though. And
so you have for stand up Jesus, you have about 9 or 10 shows scheduled in this next tour, right?
Yeah, I've already been through about 3 of them. I'm back here. But yeah.
So do you like to plan? I mean, if someone said, "Hey, Bob, here's a 60-night run," would you want to do that, or is that just too exhausting?
Well, no, I would, but there's no such thing anymore as a 60. It's not like rock and roll where you're doing anything nowadays is weekends or one-offs. Sometimes you're doing 2 or 3 nights, but it's all a weekend. So it's I got a guy working on putting something together in New England. New England's great because all you can do is plop down somewhere in New Hampshire and everything's 50 miles away, and you can, right. So you go every other day, you can go to a different, town and do a different show. So, but as far as the old, the things that I guess the guys are doing now, the big stadium shows and everything, they're not doing them. They're doing them every weekend. They're not doing them every night. There's not, you can do a 60 city tour, but it's going to take you now a year and a half.
So the show is coming up. People who's going to be the Keswick. Now, I always ask my questions, my guests this when I wrap up. You've had a very interesting career, very successful career, and you can tell yourself a humorist, the stand-up, you've acted. When you look back,
very much under the radar, though.
Right, but you've made a great living, and you have your fans, and you get to do what you love. So when you look back at your life, what are a few things, and it can be personal and it can be also professional, what are a few things that make you proud? Like, what are some things that you sit there and go, man, I'm really happy. This makes me proud that I did this.
Well, I still think that the solo shows that I do are cut out and very specific for me and not similar to all the other ones that are being done out there. When I first started doing the Male Intellect and I got involved with these promoters outside of Cleveland, Belkins, and they started me out in a little 120 seat theater, and they knew rock and roll guys know how to promote. And when I first started doing the Male Intellect, I went back to all my rock and roll connections and says, hey, this was before the internet, it was before HBO really. Says this is something people will see. And they came out and saw it. And these guys knew how to sell tickets, knew how to promote the show, knew how to get the radios going, everything. It's a lost art. It's not done now. I mean, now it's Mr. Beast. And, you do one show one night and nobody will ever come back and see you again. So I ended up starting out at this 120 seat theater, and by 6 months they had me doing a 2,400 seat theater in Cleveland for a week. And to me, that progression of the success in that one market kind of proved to me, it says, okay, this is something I can do. I can just go to all these other places. And you start out at scratch. You start out doing 99 seats, and then you start building it. People talk about it, and you see if you can build it to the next level. But that's always been something I says, I don't know if there's anybody who's done that. Not that way. So, that's what I'm pretty proud of.
Well, that's awesome. You should be proud. That's great. You think it's like 2,400 from 9. That's, if that was a sales job, you'd be getting like accolades and promotions going, oh, he brought the sales up, 480%. So it's,
it's like, it's
so,
like,
anyway.
But that's, that there's, I guess, plenty of other things, but it's, I'm proud that from a materialistic point of view, that I got a great life, a great wife. I had We had 2 homes at one point. You know, I was living up in Colorado. I was living here. Made enough to sit here. Right now, I'm taken care of. I basically will do Stand Up Jesus for free just to get it out there to for people to hear. I mean, you pay my expenses, I'll come do it. I don't need to make any money anymore.
Well, that's
Jesus
awesome.
gives
I'm
to the
glad, I'm glad I
homeless.
reached out. Exactly. And so I really want to thank you. I know it's been so long. It's so funny because, you know, once someone's been on, like you were on Cooper Talk, and when you talk to someone for an hour, you get to know them. And then you may not talk for years, but then you go, oh, yeah, you know, so that's what I'm glad you came on, because I saw you were coming in the area. And I said, I got to reach out to Robert. So your website is, give your website.
It's robertdubac.com. It's DUBAC. And then all 3 shows are on there, and you can just pick which one, you know, and where it's playing.
Right. So people go check out Robert. And do you have clips of your whole show on YouTube? How can people see your show?
Well,
is it online?
Clips of it. I've got clips of all the shows that are on the website. I've got more clips on YouTube. But I don't have there's a full show of the Male Intellect on YouTube. It's in 8 sections. Each one's about 10 minutes long. So it's it's the full thing. You have to kind of go through it. But I don't have the other 2, only because it's kind of, self-destructive. I mean, if there's a lot of times people watch the whole show, they're going to go, well, I've seen it.
Right. So people, please go check out Robert.
But Coop, if they do watch the whole show, when they come see me live, I'll just do your show.
Okay, there you go. That works. There you go. See, people. So he'll do that. So people, go check out Bob. Go to his website. Go to coopertalk.net. My one podcast. You can find 1,050 episodes, 1,052 episodes. I just said Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses. Also, I have a new podcast. Look up Lawsuits and Lessons. I'm the consultant and co-host of a show with my friend John Fagerholm, who was a entertainment attorney, but now he does business attorney. And he gets some great entrepreneurs. And we talk about that, and we sit there, and he handles some law subjects. So check that out. And the Coop Tank on YouTube is my, just won an award, an Earworthy Award for a best local podcast. It's me and 3 local business people. And we're talking about inspiration and motivation, all that stuff. So go check that all out. Don't forget to keep checking out Comedy Trainwreck with Jimmy Corham. Jimmy's puts a lot of shows on. You've got Coleman Green doing a show. You got John Kentzel and the Legendary Wid doing a show. Chico Loco doing a show. All these great shows. So please check it out. And don't forget coopscomedycorner.com to get that swag. Anyway, check out robertdubac.com. Check me out. Check out Comedy Trainwreck. And you guys all have a great weekend.
Coop's Comedy Corner.